Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is Suspects and Spirits, and I'm your host, Taylor Seraphin. And it looks like since our last episode, I've gained quite a few new little gooligans in our true crime coven. So if you just got here, hello, welcome. Welcome to this cocktail of creepy. I hope you drink up all the spooky and enjoy it so much that you tell all of your friends and family about it, and then they worry for your mental stability. Speaking of mental stability, I hope everyone is doing well. And hopefully, you did not just spiral into the abyss like I did. I just watched the last episode of Yellow Jackets, and I'm actually so mad right now. I have never hated Hilary Swank in any role she's ever played. Like, she's iconic. I think that she's amazing. But this, her character of Melissa, straight to jail. Okay? Straight to jail, Hilary. Van? Are you for real? First Natalie, now this. If you have not finished or even started Yellow Jackets, I may be spilling some spoilers. So fast forward quite a bit because I need to vent about this for a hot minute. Okay, press that button, skip ahead, boop, boop. All right, is it safe now? Just me and the people who know. You guys, what the fuck was that? Aside from Misty, Van was my favorite. I adored her. Why? Why did the TV gods do this to me? I never get to watch this show like a normal person, okay? I have a youngin'. She loves to wake up in the middle of the night, crawl into bed with us. And one time, I left the TV on when I fell asleep watching Lucifer. And this little angel of mine came toddling into our bedroom, tapped me on the forehead, and said, Mama, who dat? Meanwhile, Lucifer is full devil face with Mazikeen killing off loose demons. So yeah, I don't do that anymore. And I'll turn off the TV if I feel myself drifting. So I watch Yellow Jackets, which is much, much more graphic and unhinged than Lucifer ever was. And I watch it on my phone, okay, while I'm cooking or getting ready or doing mindless teacher stuff like laminating my entire life away. So when I watched Melissa do that to Van, after she just showed how pure her heart really was, my jaw actually dropped along with my heart, just straight into my butt. Okay. My soul, my mascara, it all dropped right into the sink. Like, Van? Why? I was fuming. Stop killing my favorite characters. If anything happens to Misty in season 4, I will riot in the streets. I will riot. So, if you're wondering how I'm doing, I mean, I've been better. When TV shows do this to me, I cannot deal. I love TV and movies. I get so invested and attached. In Lucifer, when Dan died, I cried so hard. Peaky Blinders, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it, skip ahead. When his daughter dies, actual, like, full ugly crying tears. Like, I was sobbing. And I know it's all fictional, okay? I'm not delusional, but I'm very good at suspending my disbelief and thoroughly enjoying a show or movie with every emotion in my entire body. If I watch something, I want to be invested. I want to feel it. The Barbie movie, same thing. I cried like a baby, okay? And same with songs. Songs just get me. So, Yellow Jackets, you guys really did a number on me this week. And I know I was a little late to the Yellow Jackets game, and it takes me a long time to finish a show. But what the hell was that? I'm so sad. Van, R.I.P. All right. Okay, I feel better now. I just needed to let it all out, straight into this microphone by myself in my room. To you guys, you listeners. This has been the weirdest part of podcasting to get used to. I don't have a co-host. I'm just like talking to myself. So, I mean, originally I was going to have a co-host and I was supposed to, but it just didn't work out. So I said, fuck it. I'll go on this adventure by myself. And I mean, I'm no Bailey Sarian. I'm no Phoebe Judge, but I'm doing pretty all right, I think. I'm getting the hang of it. Anywho, thanks for coming to my TED Talk and letting me get it all out. Oh, I just had the best idea. Light bulb. I should say, thanks for coming to my dead talk at the end of paranormal episodes. Is that stupid? Is that dumb? Probably. Am I going to do it anyways? Also, probably. Okay, enough of this. Let's get into today's story. This one I've actually been wanting to do since I started this podcast. I drafted up an episode at the end of June and had planned to record it for episode 9. But with the passing of Dan Rivera, I didn't want it to feel like it was done in poor taste and it was sensationalized. That is the last thing I want to do. I loved Dan Rivera's work. He was well respected. He took his guardianship very seriously and was an essential part of Nesper. So, yeah, I held off. But with all the recent hullabaloo in the paranormal world, the news of Matt and Elton purchasing Ed and Lorraine's home and museum, I decided I wanted to speak about it because I think there are a lot of misunderstandings that people may have. And I mean, I'm just an indie podcast, right? What do I know? But for the people who do listen, who may have questions or concerns, maybe this will help clear some things up. And of course, like with any story in the paranormal world, there are going to be some very different opinions out there. Some believe wholeheartedly, like me. Some are skeptical. Some fall somewhere in between in the gray. My job here is to share the story, share the history, and the legacy, and then you can decide what to believe. I will never, ever tell you what to believe or think. I will always share my opinion and my beliefs about topics, but I respect that people can have differing opinions. My issue is when people just start regurgitating information like it's fact without doing any real research on the matter. So believe whatever you want, but if you aren't sure about the actual story or background, it's better to maybe just not like say anything or at the very least, say you don't have the full story and keep an open mind. Be open to perspective. Otherwise, that's how misinformation and disinformation get out there, which nobody wants. No one likes misleading reports or verbal clickbait. With that being said, today we are going to dive into the history, origin, and legacy of the Annabelle doll. And of course, I can't do that without including the Warrens and Dan Rivera. Now, full transparency, I love the Warrens. If you don't, that's okay. We do not have to agree. You can be skeptical and still be respectful. But it is a well known fact that Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved in the Annabelle case, so they will be included in this episode because they are a very important part of her origin story. And oh boy, do I have a shit ton of history for you here. I am actually a giant nerd when it comes to the Warrens and Annabelle. I've been fascinated with them since I found out about them when I was, I don't know, like 12. Amityville was one of my favorite stories. And after geeking out over this couple, I was insanely excited for the first Conjuring movie to come out. And I think that was in 2013? It's like almost embarrassing how excited I was, but I own it now, so it's fine. The Warren legacy has become controversial over the years, with skeptics and critics coming forward saying their accounts are exaggerated. But I think that public opinion and speculation have often overshadowed the real story. At the end of the day, none of us knew Ed and Lorraine or what really transpired. And the people who did, their daughter Judy, her husband Tony, their family, their friends, and members of Nesper, they loved them deeply. And I want to respect that. So let's get into it. The story of Annabelle isn't just a tale of a cursed doll. This is a story about trust, fear, trapped emotion, and the power of belief. Annabelle's story begins in the year 1970 when a young nurse named Donna, who lived in a modest apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, received a birthday present from her mother. It was a Raggedy Ann doll, the kind with, red yarn hair, button eyes, and a stitched on smile that seemed permanently cheerful. It was a very sweet, thoughtful gift, maybe, a bit childish for a grown woman, but Donna placed the doll on her bed and she thanked her mother. At first, there was nothing unusual, but soon after receiving the doll, things started to get strange. Donna shared the apartment with her roommate Angie, another nursing student. Both of them had very busy schedules filled with long shifts and exams, so when they noticed that the doll wasn't exactly where they had left it, like legs crossed instead of straight or arms positioned differently, they chalked it up to forgetfulness. I mean, they were tired and their schedules were hectic. Nursing is no joke. So they just figured they were sleep deprived and delusional. They would tease each other. Oh, and did you move the doll? No, Dawn, you're losing it. Just silly, harmless stuff. Like kind of joking, but also kind of not. A little puzzled. But over the next few weeks, the doll's little movements became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just shifting positions anymore. It was appearing in completely different rooms. Donna would leave it on her bed before work and then come home to find it sitting on the couch when no one had been home. Angie would find it in the kitchen facing the door as if waiting for someone. So naturally, the girls began experimenting. They would set the doll down deliberately in specific places and wait, but without fail, each time it moved. And that's not all, because if you know this case, you know about the notes. After they realized they were not crazy and that Annabelle was actually moving, the doll also started leaving notes. And not cute reminders like, don't forget the milk. The notes were left on small pieces of parchment paper, scribbled with childlike handwriting. The messages were simple, but chilling in their simplicity. Messages such as help us would be written in pencil and always found near the doll. The strange thing, though, is that neither Donna nor Angie kept parchment paper in the apartment. Now, naturally, the girls started to assume that maybe an intruder was doing this, that someone in the apartment thought it would be funny to play a prank on them, break in, move the doll around, leave little spooky notes, but this theory would soon be disproved. As much as Donna and Angie wanted to laugh it off, their friend Lou wasn't so amused. In some accounts, Lou was Donna's boyfriend, but in the Warrens' account and the official story, he was not. He was just a close friend of both girls and had been very close with Donna for a long time. He did behave like a boyfriend at times. Some say he was overly protective to the point of being possessive, which not cool. But nonetheless, Lou had a bad feeling about that doll from the very start. He did not like it, and he was not shy about his opinion. One night, Lou was sleeping on the couch at Donna's apartment when he woke up abruptly. He couldn't move. His eyes darted around the room, panic rising as he realized he was paralyzed. And that's when he felt it, a cold, suffocating pressure on his chest. When Lou looked down, the doll was there, crawling up toward his neck. Lou could not scream. He could not push it away. He could only watch as the doll's soft little fabric arms pressed into his throat. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The pressure vanished, and Lou bolted upright, gasping for air. And there was Annabelle, just hanging out, laying innocently on the floor, several feet away. Now, if this has ever happened to you, you may be thinking sleep paralysis. And that may be true. It could be connected. If you know about sleep paralysis, then you know about sleep paralysis demons. But the worst for Lou was yet to come. A few days later, Lou was helping Donna prepare for a trip. As he entered her bedroom, he felt an icy chill wash over him. He spun around, certain that he wasn't alone. And that's when he felt a searing pain across his chest. Lou pulled up his shirt to find 7 claw-like scratches, 3 vertical and 4 horizontal. The marks burned as if freshly cut, but both he and Donna were like, what the fuck just happened? How did those get there? And within 2 days, they had just mysteriously faded. Not usually something that happens with deep scratches. Donna and Angie were terrified after this incident. This was no prank and impossible for it to be an intruder at this point. Whatever was happening in their apartment had escalated violently. And some think Annabelle targeted Lou because he was not too shy about how he felt toward her. And as we know, Annabelle has a reputation for retaliation when it comes to mockery, which, can you blame her? No one likes that. So desperate for answers, the girls contacted a medium. The session was very tense. The air in the apartment was so thick with anticipation, you could slice it up and serve it on a plate. And this medium claimed to make contact with a spirit named Annabelle Higgins. According to her, Annabelle had been a young girl, just 7 years old, who died tragically on the property before the apartment complex was built. She said Annabelle's spirit felt very safe with Donna and Angie. They were nurses, good people. The medium went on to explain that this little girl was lonely and completely harmless. So, of course, the girls, with their kind hearts, agreed to let Annabelle stay. They were like, oh, that's really sad. She can absolutely stay here. But here's the thing about opening your home to a spirit. You never really know who you're letting in. If you know about demons and dark energies, then you know they tend to mimic children. They love to play on your vulnerability. They see that yellow underbelly and strike once they feel they have gained your trust. So word about this spread pretty quickly, and it wasn't long before Donna and Angie were put in touch with Ed and Lorraine Warren. When the Warrens arrived at the apartment, they didn't see a sweet little girl spirit. They saw deception. In their eyes, this wasn't the work of a human ghost at all. Ed Warren explained it like this: inhuman spirits, demons, can't possess inanimate objects like dolls, but they can manipulate objects. They can attach to them, using them as conduits to interact with the physical world. And the doll, Ed said, was just the bait. Lorraine, a clairvoyant, was a little more blunt. She sensed a dark presence, something that had been lurking, patiently building trust with Donna and Angie, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Warrens believed the entity's ultimate goal wasn't to possess the doll, it wanted to possess Donna herself. With the help of an Episcopal priest named Father Cook, they performed a blessing in the apartment, a kind of lesser exorcism designed to cleanse the home of demonic influences. But the doll, that was a completely different story. Ed decided it was far too dangerous to leave in the girl's care. So he placed Annabelle in the back seat of their car, the Warrens' car, and the Warrens began their drive back to their home in Monroe, Connecticut. It should have been a fairly uneventful trip. But according to the Warrens, their car stalled multiple times, the steering locked up without warning, and at one point, Ed claimed that the brakes just failed entirely and it almost sent them into a collision. It wasn't until Ed doused the doll in holy water that the car's issues stopped. Once back at the Warrens' residence, Annabelle was placed in Ed's study. But even there, the doll seemed very restless. There were reports of levitating, teleporting across rooms, and even growling noises circulated among those who visited the Warrens' home. One story that Ed loved to tell was about a young priest who came to see Annabelle. The priest, with a skeptical grin, picked up the doll and said, quote, "You're just a rag doll, Annabelle. You can't hurt anyone," end quote. Ed was horrified at this, and he warned the priest to be very cautious, to respect the power that they were dealing with. But the priest laughed and he just left. 3 hours later, that priest's car was totaled in a horrific accident. He survived, but claimed that he saw Annabelle's face in his rearview mirror moments before the crash. The Warrens knew that they couldn't keep Annabelle in their home, at least not without precautions. So they had a specially crafted glass and wooden case built for the doll, etched with the words, "Warning, positively do not open," and those are in all capital letters. She became the centerpiece of their occult museum, a collection of cursed and haunted artifacts the Warrens had gathered over decades of investigations. But locking Annabelle away didn't stop the stories. If anything, it actually made them stronger. Visitors claimed to feel a sense of dread when standing near her case. Some who mocked the doll later experienced car accidents, health scares, and strange encounters they could not explain away. And so, Annabelle, the Raggedy Ann doll, innocent in appearance, terrifying in reputation, became one of the most infamous haunted objects in America. Now, many people, when they first hear the story, they're sort of confused by this. People tend to think of haunted dolls as creepy porcelain faces with dead eyes. They feel it's a little strange that this type of doll is the one afflicted with dark energy. But there's actually some history behind these theories, because there's something that most people don't know about rag dolls. They weren't always just bedtime companions. In certain folk traditions, especially in the American South and Appalachia, cloth dolls were often used for something much darker. Sometimes these dolls were made to resemble a person and then stabbed, tossed, or beaten, a symbolic act of aggression, a way to punish someone from a safe distance. Similar to voodoo, but without the intent, more just, to get the feelings out. Even during wartime, the same idea showed up in protest dolls, where children would quote unquote punish the likeness of an enemy soldier. And even in everyday homes, early child psychology research noted that kids sometimes took out their frustration on dolls, which, yeah, we see that a lot, right? Hitting, shaking, throwing, because it's safer than doing it to a sibling or a parent. And then there's also an unsettling note about Raggedy Ann being used as a quote unquote discipline doll. Some parents reportedly used the doll in a mock punishment ritual where the child was told that the doll had done something bad and the parent would spank or whip the doll in front of the child, sometimes to teach obedience. Kids would see this as a lesson. and know that the same would happen to them if they did not obey their parents, which is gross. Raggedy Ann, being soft and nearly indestructible, could soak up all of that rough handling. But here's where folklore starts to creep in. In some stories, objects, especially dolls, are said to hold on to the emotions poured into them, whether it's love or rage, which makes you wonder if a doll can soak up years of affection, what else might it be holding? And if you look at the history of where these dolls came from, it gets even more controversial and dark. The Raggedy Ann doll has a wholesome public image, but its origins and cultural context have layers that connect indirectly to racism in the early 20th century America. Raggedy Ann was created by Johnny Gruel in 1915. Gruel designed the doll after finding an old faceless rag doll in his parents' attic, and he decided to paint a face on it and give it red yarn hair. The name Raggedy Ann came from combining two James Whitcomb Riley poems, The Raggedy Man and Little Orphan Annie. In 1918, he published Raggedy Ann stories featuring the doll as a sweet, moral character. The books and dolls were marketed together, becoming a major brand. But Gruel's work emerged during the height of the minstrel caricature era in American children's literature and toys. These used exaggerated and dehumanizing stereotypes of Black people. While Raggedy Ann herself wasn't portrayed as Black, she was part of a toy and storybook market that heavily relied on racial caricatures for quote unquote humor and moral lessons. In some later Raggedy Ann and Andy books, side characters fit into the racist tropes of the time. These elements reinforce the racial hierarchy of the era. Now remember, I just mentioned that these dolls were often used as a discipline tool, also to take out aggression. And in some Southern households, especially segregated era ones, this ritual involved Black rag dolls being used to normalize violence toward Black bodies as play. This practice is deeply tied to racist conditioning in children's games of the time, which is so disgusting. Racism is definitely learned behavior, and no one can tell me otherwise. Kids are so sweet, and as a teacher, I can 1000% tell you this is something taught to them. Kids don't just inherently believe that stuff. So, while the official Raggedy Ann was marketed as a comforting, moral, loving figure, she was also created and popularized in a time when the toy industry around her was steeped in racist stereotypes. And some cultural uses of rag dolls, both black and white versions, perpetuated racialized violence in very subtle, normalized ways. Now, we don't know if Annabelle was ever subjugated to this type of behavior. And we know that, according to Ed, dolls cannot be possessed but only act as a conduit. So one could ask, is it possible that the entity who used Annabelle to access Donna, Lou, and Angie did so simply because the doll seemed innocent, or because it sensed a deeper connection to something far darker involved with these dolls and then latched on, using that trapped energy to fuel its mission? I definitely believe that items can hold energy. So Annabelle, being a conduit, is not too far out of reach in my personal opinion. But again, you can come to your own conclusions. Now, of course, it's unlikely that Ed and Lorraine knew about the history of the doll, considering Annabelle's case happened in the 70s. And regardless of opinion, Ed and Lorraine seem to be the only ones willing to help Donna, Lou, and Angie. The Warrens called themselves seekers of the supernatural. To some, Ed and Lorraine were fearless pioneers, America's original ghost hunters. To others, they were master storytellers, spinning tales that blurred the line between belief and showmanship. But whether you revere them as defenders of faith or dismiss them as folklorists with a knack for theatrics, one fact remains. The Warrens built a legacy that shaped modern paranormal culture. But their journey began long before Annabelle. Ed was born in 1926. He was the son of a Connecticut police officer, and from a very young age, he claimed to live in a haunted house. The flickering lights and ghostly whispers, he said, were his teachers. He wasn't a scientist and he wasn't ordained by the church, but Ed considered himself a self-taught demonologist guided by faith and experience. Lorraine Warren was a psychic medium from childhood. She described herself as a, quote, light trance clairvoyant, someone who could see and feel spirits where others saw empty rooms. Their love story was as much about the paranormal as it was about each other. Together, they formed the New England Society for Psychic Research, NESPR, the first official ghost hunting group in New England. But their investigations were never about cold readings or EMF detectors. They were spiritual warfare. For Ed and Lorraine, every haunting was a battle between good and evil, with people's souls hanging in the balance. And when the Warrens investigated the Annabelle case, their explanation wasn't folklore, it was demonology. That was their specialty. Ed described it as a 3-stage process of demonic infestation. And if you've seen the movies, you know what these steps are. Step 1, infestation. The spirit latches onto an object or location, manifesting minor disturbances, like Annabelle's subtle movements or scribbled notes. Step 2, oppression. The entity's actions escalate, creating emotional turmoil, fear, and physical attacks. Just like Lou's suffocation and the claw marks, those were classic signs. And step 3, possession. The final goal, not of a doll, not of a house, but of a person. This framework became the foundation of many Warren cases, from the Perron family haunting to the infamous Amityville horror. But what made Annabelle's story unique was how unassuming the object of attachment was. People expected haunted houses, cursed mirrors, maybe even ominous statues, gargoyles. But a doll? A child's toy? That was the perfect deception. As their reputation grew, the Warrens began collecting the objects left behind in their investigations. In their eyes, these items were dangerous, physical anchors for dark forces that couldn't be left in the wild. Thus, the Warren Occult Museum was born. Tucked away in the basement of their Monroe, Connecticut home, the museum became a repository of the bizarre and the terrifying. Things like a conjuring mirror used for summoning spirits, a satanic idol found in the woods of Connecticut, and of course, the infamous shadow doll said to attack people in their dreams. But no object drew more attention or more fear than Annabelle. Encased in a glass cabinet with that simple wood frame and the sign reading, "Warning, positively do not open," Annabelle became a silent sentinel, her stitched smile as unnerving as it was iconic. Visitors were drawn to her, despite the warnings. Lorraine used to say that the doll's case wasn't there to protect people from Annabelle, it was more to protect Annabelle from the people who doubted her power. Because, again, they had immense respect for all things paranormal, whether it be the dark or the light energy. To them, it didn't matter, and if they could not rid the entity from the object being used as a conduit, then at the very least, they could respect it. But not everyone understood this. Among the many stories that orbit Annabelle's legend, one stands out as a chilling cautionary tale. It was a summer afternoon when a young man and his girlfriend visited the Warrens Museum. The boyfriend, picture leather jacket, cocky grin, he mocked Annabelle's display. He banged on the glass, daring her to scratch him like she did to Lou. Ed intervened immediately, warning the young man to show respect. The couple laughed it off and left on their motorcycle. An hour later, that young man was dead. He lost control of his bike and crashed head on into a tree. His girlfriend survived, but was left hospitalized for months. To skeptics, this was just a tragic coincidence. But to the Warrens and to those who believed, the message was clear. Annabelle doesn't take well to mockery. But of course, not everyone was convinced. And this is fairly common, when dealing with the paranormal. Throughout their career, the Warrens faced criticism from scientists, skeptics, and even some within the church. Paranormal investigator Joe Nickel often described their cases as embellished stories lacking empirical evidence. Others accused them of exploiting vulnerable families and leaning too heavily on religious explanations without proof. The Amityville horror, arguably their most famous case, became a lightning rod for controversy, with many labeling it as a hoax fueled by media frenzy. Now, this story is widely known, but for those who don't know, or maybe you don't know the controversy, here is a quick synopsis. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. shot and killed 6 members of his family in their home at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. He claimed at various times that voices told him to do it, but his story changed multiple times. He was convicted of second-degree murder. In December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz bought the DeFeo home for a bargain price. It was around $80,000, I believe. They left just 28 days later, saying that the house was plagued by intense paranormal activity. According to the Lutzes, there were swarms of flies in the winter, green slime or blood oozing from the walls, cold spots, a mysterious pig-like creature with glowing red eyes, doors and windows slamming, strange smells, and George waking at 3:15 a.m. nightly, which is the exact time of the murders. Now, here's where the controversy explodes. William Weber's claim, and William Weber was DeFeo's defense attorney. Weber later said that he, George, and Kathy Lutz made up the haunting story over many bottles of wine to help the Lutzes get out of their mortgage and to help him with DeFeo's insanity defense. The Lutzes had bought this home and it was way out of their price range, so that is why they agreed to all of this. Basically, they were housebroke and upside down on their mortgage and they needed a way out. But there were inconsistencies in the Lutz's testimony. Some details of their experiences changed over time or weren't corroborated by physical evidence. And when it came to investigations, paranormal investigators, including the Warrens, said that they found signs of a haunting. But skeptics, like the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, found no evidence and chalked it up to exaggeration. And then, of course, there was the money motive. The Lutzes signed a book deal quickly after moving out. The book, Amityville Horror, and the 1979 movie cemented the legend, fueling suspicion that the story was embellished for profit. And then there was speculation about the infamous Ghost Boy photo. Taken during the Warren investigation in 1976, this photo showed the ghost of a young boy peeking from a doorway. Skeptics believe that it's either a camera crew member or a photographic artifact. And this story is still widely controversial because on one side, it points to consistent core claims of the Lutzes, the emotional toll on them, and certain unexplained events recorded by investigators. On the other hand, it highlights legal disputes, public admissions of fabrication, lack of physical evidence, and how the story conveniently became a media and financial success. Now, of course, when it comes to people like Ed and Lorraine, there will be clients who take full advantage and use them for their own sick depravity. But there is absolutely no arguing that a horrible, senseless mass murder happened in that Amityville home. And with that comes a lot of trapped energy. The current owners of the home say that there are definitely strange occurrences, but none like the Lutz family claimed. Basically, it's haunted, but not in a sensationalized dark manner, more residual, like the family is just stuck doing their day-to-day activities, which is very sad. So it is likely that Lorraine's clairvoyance picked up on that energy when she was there, and she tried to help, but the Lutz family just saw it as an opportunity. And she was probably feeling a lot of that negative energy, that demonic force from DeFeo, who committed the crimes. I personally believe that Lorraine was genuine in her abilities. There are a lot of people who say that they've met her at seminars and she knew things that she just couldn't possibly have known. So just based on like interviews with her and videos that I've seen, I do believe that they were truly trying to help people. I don't know if you guys have seen the video. It's on YouTube, but it's an old footage of Ed and Lorraine going to a home to conduct an investigation. Off the top of my head, I'm so sorry, my brain is jumbled right now. I can't remember which case it was, but they were trying to help a family who was suffering from a haunting, and they're in the kitchen, and you can see chairs moving. The little girl's sitting in a chair, and the chair starts like moving up and down, and the girl isn't doing it. Like the way her feet are, the mom is trying to hold the chair down. You can tell the mom isn't moving the chair. There's a lot of footage out there and things that aren't explainable, especially back when they were doing their investigations. It's not like they had CGI. So they weren't using special effects in these videos, but you can find them on YouTube. You can go look it up and determine your own opinion. Ed's methods and persona are a bit more debated because he was self-taught, but so are many other paranormal investigators. So I don't know why that's such a big deal. But here's the thing. Ed and Lorraine never claimed to be scientists. They saw themselves as spiritual first responders. Whether you believed in demons or not, they believed in the power of belief itself. And that is what made the story of Annabelle so enduring. It didn't matter that the doll wasn't levitating on camera. What mattered was that people felt something when they stood in front of her. And it's worth noting that the Warrens never charged anyone for their services. They wanted to help people, and I think they really tried the best that they could. There's a lot of speculation about how, they made money from the movies. But to that I say, so do plenty of other people whose true stories are turned into movies. Hollywood loves to embellish, and Ed and Lorraine, I'm sure, let them because they understood that's what makes a good movie, right? Hollywood takes creative license. In 2013, the Warrens' legacy reached a global audience with the release of The Conjuring, a film based on the Perron family case. Although Annabelle's story was only a prologue in that film, her impact was immediate. The following year, Annabelle the movie hit theaters, followed by sequels that further cemented her as a modern horror icon. But here's where fiction diverged a bit from fact, because again, Hollywood. The real Annabelle was a soft, yarn haired Raggedy Ann doll, like mentioned before. The Hollywood version was a cracked porcelain doll with sinister glass eyes and a face designed to evoke nightmares. And the Warrens often address this in interviews. Ed once said, quote, "A demonic spirit doesn't need a scary face. It uses innocence to lure you in," end quote. Lorraine added that the real doll's appearance was in many ways more disturbing because of its stark contrast between appearance and alleged intent. The movies amplified the fear of Annabelle, but for those who visited the occult museum, the quiet, unassuming ragdoll behind glass was far more unsettling. As Ed and Lorraine aged, their investigations slowed, but Annabelle remained a focal point of their work. And it was during these years that a new figure entered the picture, a man who would become the primary handler of Annabelle and who would carry the Warren legacy into the next generation. And that man was Dan Rivera. Dan wasn't a paranormal celebrity. He wasn't featured in Hollywood films or best-selling books. He was a military veteran, a man of discipline, precision, and unshakable faith. Lorraine trusted Dan implicitly. He became not just a protege, but a protector. Dan's role wasn't glamorous. He maintained the occult museum, ensured Annabelle's case was never tampered with, and accompanied the doll on sanctioned public appearances. His bond with Lorraine was very deep. It was founded on mutual respect and a shared mission to educate the public on the dangers of the occult. Dan Rivera wasn't interested in fame. His focus was preservation of history, of artifacts, and of the truths he believed were often distorted by media sensationalism. But as the Warrens passed, Ed in 2006 and Lorraine in 2019, the responsibility of safeguarding Annabelle and the Warren legacy increasingly fell onto Rivera's shoulders. Dan wasn't really one to sit still, so under his stewardship, Nesper launched the Devils on the Run tour, where Rivera would bring Annabelle, always in her case, to select events. Unlike Hollywood's flashy horror conventions, these appearances were pretty somber, educational, and steeped in Rivera's meticulous storytelling. He wasn't there to scare people. He was there to warn them about the dangers of dabbling in the occult, the consequences of disbelief, and the Warrens' mission to protect the innocent. Audiences listened. Even skeptics found themselves drawn to Rivera's measured, no-nonsense delivery. He spoke of Annabelle not as a carnival sideshow, but as a symbol, a reminder that evil, whether literal or metaphorical, often comes disguised in the most innocent forms. Dan Rivera never sought to be the face of the paranormal world. He wasn't interested in headlines or Hollywood scripts, but by the time Dan had passed away, he had become something the Warrens had always known he was destined to be, a guardian, not of artifacts, not of myths, but of responsibility and legacy. When Ed Warren passed in 2006, Lorraine found herself bearing the weight of their life's work. She needed someone who wouldn't just continue their research, but who could protect the pieces of history that they'd amassed, not as trophies, but as evidence. And Dan Rivera was that person. So, to everyone saying that Dan took advantage of the Warrens' passing, showcasing Annabelle, is just completely inaccurate. Dan had been behind the scenes for years before taking Annabelle on the Devils on the Run tour, and his goal was to educate for those who maybe, couldn't go to the museum or wanted to know more about Annabelle. He didn't want to put on a huge show. Truly ask yourself if you knew who Dan Rivera was before his passing. Probably not, right? Unless you are very deeply immersed and educated about the paranormal community, you likely had no idea who Dan even was. And look, I'm guilty as well of hearing stories and jumping to conclusions, but I can admit when I'm wrong, and I will always look into information before commenting. And if I'm not sure about the validity, I will just admit that I don't know the whole story. I think as a society, we have become so reliant on TikTok as a source of information, and it's not really the best way to get accurate facts. I know, crazy. A lot of people lie for views and love to take their opinion and just run with it, hoping that others will jump onto the bandwagon of manipulation. And I get it. People are entitled to their opinion. We are entitled to believe whatever we want. I believe in the paranormal. You don't have to. But when it comes to people's lives, like Dan, remember that this is a person, a human with a family and loved ones who now have to navigate life without him, and they are devastated. You might not know the whole story, so don't spread disinformation about people. It's not cool, especially after their death. And when it came to Dan's relationship with Annabelle, it was actually unlike anyone else's. To him, she wasn't just a celebrity prop, she wasn't a gimmick, she was a reminder of the unseen consequences of disbelief. Dan would often say, quote, "It's not about the doll. It's about what we invite into our lives when we let curiosity outrun caution." End quote. He wasn't trying to scare people into belief. He was just trying to educate them into respect. During public appearances, Dan's handling of Annabelle was meticulous. The glass case was never opened in public. He never touched it without ritual prayers. He'd explain the process of binding, the religious protections placed upon her, the gloves he used that were also used by the Warrens, and why skepticism wasn't an excuse for arrogance, right? Like you can be skeptical, but don't be haughty about it. People listened. Even the loudest doubters found themselves pausing when Dan spoke. As the paranormal world grew louder and louder with television shows, internet theories, and Hollywood adaptation, Dan Rivera remained steadfast and quiet. He maintained the Warren Occult Museum long after Ed and Lorraine had passed, even as local zoning battles and safety regulations forced the museum to close its doors. Dan didn't see this as a defeat. To him, the museum was never about public tours, anyways. It was about preserving spiritual integrity. Behind closed doors, Dan continued his work, performing blessings on objects, ensuring Annabelle's case was never breached, training a small circle of entrusted Nesper members on handling cursed artifacts with reverence. For Dan, the work didn't need an audience. The evil he believed in didn't care for cameras, it only cared for cracks in faith. And Dan had spent his life sealing those cracks. Unfortunately, on July 13th, 2025, Dan Rivera passed away very unexpectedly, and the paranormal community mourned a guardian, a person, a father, not a celebrity. He was only 54 years old, and he left behind a wife and 4 children. There was no grand conspiracies in the community surrounding his death, no sinister circumstances. Dan's passing was attributed to health complications. But with the close-knit circles of Nesper followers, his death felt like a shudder through the foundation of their world. Dan's family, his friends, they saw Dan's life not as a cautionary tale, but as a legacy of duty, faith, and quiet heroism. Dan didn't just leave behind a legacy. He left behind his family. His wife, Sarah, said, quote, "I've loved you from the moment we met. Your eyes, that smile, it was all so written in the stars. You are the love of my life and will be forever. Until we meet again, my love, may you be surrounded by God's eternal love and gilded light." End quote. On another occasion, she went on to say, quote, "He was the center of his family and a pillar of love and strength. As a devoted husband, father of 4 sons, and a staunchly faithful friend, he always had a quiet source of resilience, strength, and endless hope." Daniel carried a light and a brave heart every day through his life and his work. We are currently at a loss for words as we process his loss, but are extremely thankful for the love, support, and respect during this unimaginable time. End quote. Of his 4 children, his son David was quoted saying, "My dad was a dedicated father and loving husband. He was famous for his work as a lead paranormal investigator of Nesper, where he helped countless people out of dark times and brought comfort and a sense of safety to those who needed it. But more importantly, he was my father, a great man who loved deeply and lived fully." End quote. According to David, Dan loved working on classic cars, listening to rock and hip hop, camping, and spending time with his family, adding, quote, "He lit up a room with his smile, kindness, and sarcastic, witty humor." End quote. Dan's family is in pieces, you guys, just trying to put them back together without even knowing how. And this is the case for anyone who has ever suddenly, abruptly lost a loved one. It is very, very difficult and unimaginable. Today, NESPR, the New England Society for Psychic Research, continues. It is led by Tony Spera, Ed and Lorraine's son-in-law, who had worked alongside the Warrens and Dan Rivera for years. If you've seen the movies or know anything about the Warrens, then you know that Ed and Lorraine had a daughter named Judy, and Tony is her husband. He's worked alongside Ed and Lorraine since, I believe, the 80s. Annabelle remains secured, still housed in her glass case, untouched and bound by the same religious protections Ed, Lorraine, and Dan had enforced so strictly. The Occult Museum has long been a beacon of paranormal history and investigation, and although it was forced to close its doors after Lorraine's death in 2019, to those who uphold the Warren legacy, the museum was never truly about the physical location anyway. It was about the mission, a mission Dan Rivera lived every day. Dan wasn't trying to prove Annabelle to the world. He was just trying to remind the world that belief isn't a requirement for consequence. And for Annabelle, she's been immortalized in films, documentaries, podcasts, and countless internet stories. But to the people who truly understand her story, she's not necessarily a villain, she's a witness to the fragile line between belief and hubris. A reminder that the most unassuming things can become conduits for forces far beyond human comprehension. Dan Rivera ensured that Annabelle's case wasn't just a prison, in a sense, for her. It was a testament, a glass-framed caution sign, kind of saying, just because you don't believe doesn't mean you're immune. Dan Rivera never claimed to have all the answers. He didn't pose as a paranormal celebrity. He didn't dramatize his experiences. He simply just did the work. He protected what needed protecting. He shared what needed sharing. And he respected what deserved respect. And in doing so, he became a bridge between Ed and Lorraine's era and a new generation still trying to understand where folklore ends and faith begins. Because a lot of us struggle with our faith. As long as Annabelle sits behind that glass, and as long as people remember the quiet man who kept her there, Dan Rivera's legacy will never be forgotten, and neither will the Warrens. In the wake of Dan Rivera's passing, the question loomed: who would take up the mantle? Not just anyone could step into that role. And this wasn't about showmanship, it was about responsibility. What many don't know is that in April, Dan had actually contacted a person that he thought would be a wonderful addition to the home, the museum, and the Nesper family. And that person he contacted was Elton Castee. Back in 2022, Tony Spera and Nesper actually chose Elton and his overnight crew to be the first to investigate the Warrens Museum. So this was not new territory for Elton. He has known these people for years, and he's been building these relationships way before the home was available for purchase. For those of you who don't know, Elton is a paranormal investigator and YouTube creator. He is best known for his channels TFIL, which stands for the Fuck It List. They travel all over. It's amazing. The videos are phenomenal. And he's also known for his overnight channel, where he does paranormal investigations, and his live show and podcast. I'm not sure if it's still an ongoing podcast, but it was. It is called Haunted Homies. They read stories. It's kind of like a comedy show. People submit stories. It's very fun. What a lot of people were not aware of before all of this is that Elton is extremely close with Matt Rife. They're best friends. One of the favorite rumors spreading around the internet right now is that Matt Rife bought Ed and Lorraine's home and museum to make it a cash cow. and has no idea what he's doing. Many people are like, this is so out of left field. This is so random. Why would Matt Rife want to purchase this? This is devastating to the Warren legacy and whatever. What they don't know is that Matt has been involved in the paranormal community for years. He has always been interested in the topic and has gone on a ton, like I can't even count, a ton of investigations with both Elton and also been on a few episodes of Ghost Adventures with Zach Bagans and Aaron Goodwin and the whole crew. But mostly, he's worked with Elton. Matt is a part of the Overnight channel with Elton, and he's also a part of Haunted Homies. The Overnight members, including Matt, have been to countless haunted locations. I mean, I definitely can't list them all. I'll list off a few, but they do some incredible work. I mean, some of the places that they've been to are the most haunted places in the world, and their investigations are very thorough. So some of the places that they have been to alongside Matt Rife, Matt has been to these as well, are the Cecil Hotel, the Poltergeist House in the UK, the Ancient Ram Inn, also in the UK, the Woodchester Mansion, that's UK as well, the Whaley House, the Conjuring House, the Paris Catacombs, the Ballygally Castle, the Mansfield Reformatory, the Jack the Ripper Museum in England, the Winchester Mystery House, the Queen Mary, the Preston School of Industry, also known as the Preston Castle, and so many more. I cannot stress to you how many locations they've been to. One of my personal favorites was the more recent Spawn Ranch investigation. You know, where the Manson family lived. That investigation was incredible. Matt didn't attend that one, but the evidence there was very validating. All of their videos are amazing. This crew is incredibly funny, humble, respectful in their curiosity. People who know me know that I love Matt Rife and I love Elton, but funny enough, I didn't even learn about Matt Rife through his comedy. Sorry, Matt. I learned about him through Elton's channel, specifically the Cecil Hotel episode back in 2020. After all the Elisa Lam stuff happened, that just added to the lore of that place, and they had been wanting to investigate it anyways. Matt has been at this for a long time, working with Elton and the Overnight crew and really wonderful psychics and mediums like Patty. Patty is so cool. I love her. And they try to capture the best possible evidence of the paranormal that they can. And it is abundant. If you have not yet, go check out their channel. It's one of my favorites. If you like Sam and Colby, Exploring with Josh, or anything of that nature, if you like Ghost Adventures, Kate, you're going to love Overnight. Ginger is my absolute favorite. I adore her. That's Elton's wife, and she is the sweetest. Elton is also really amazing. And he actually raised over $100,000 in donations from his August merch box for the Rivera family. All of it is going to them. Every single cent, which is just very selfless. Like he could do so many things with that money for the museum, for his channel. He's not going to. That's going to Dan and his family. So Elton seems like a pretty solid guy. And all the people in Nesper, when you watch, videos of them talking about cases that they've dealt with, they get emotional. These people are very invested in what they do. And for those of you wondering why the hell Matt Rife would purchase this place, hopefully this explains it. Now you understand that Elton and Matt weren't just outsiders looking in. They had built relationships with Tony Spera and the Warren family, spending years gaining the trust required to be considered for such a role. Dan was a pivotal part of this for them. He's the one who reached out to Elton and said, "Hey, you want to buy a house?" Because Elton had been wanting to purchase a haunted location for years. They tried to purchase the Conjuring house and it didn't work out. So their dedication here wasn't performative. It was very earnest. When the opportunity arose to acquire the Warrens' family home in the Occult Museum, Matt and Elton didn't see it as a trophy. They saw it as a responsibility to continue the work, protect the artifacts, and honor the principles that Dan Rivera and the Warrens lived by. They aren't interested in turning Annabelle into a viral moment. In fact, they've both been pretty vocal about their respect for the religious protections, spiritual boundaries, and meticulous protocols that Dan enforced. And for the next 5 years, they're going to be the guardians of this place and of Annabelle. They understand the line between curiosity and carelessness, and they've made it very clear that they intend to walk that line with caution and reverence. Under their watch, Annabelle remains sealed. The museum is being restored not as a public attraction, it's not public, but as a private sanctuary of education, research, and preservation, just as the Warrens intended. Matt and Elton's vision isn't to exploit the Warrens' legacy, but to preserve it for future generations, blending Dan's quiet vigilance with modern platforms that can educate audiences who might otherwise never encounter these stories with the seriousness they deserve. There has been a lot of misconception about the museum itself as well. Many in the paranormal community are angry about it being used as a quote unquote cash cow by Matt and Elton. But let's not forget that this museum is just that, guys. It's a museum. The Warrens themselves held public tours. It was limited and private, just like Matt and Elton are doing. They didn't operate it like a public walk in museum with regular open hours. Instead, visits were by appointment only or through pre-arranged events like lectures or seminars, similar, again, to what Matt and Elton have planned. You have to book ahead of time. It's not a walk-in place. It is only going to be reserved for those interested in investigative purposes and learning from the members of Nesper or Elton or whoever is there at the time. So yes, you can stay in the home. But when entering the museum, they have made it abundantly clear that you may not be in there without a guide who is very well educated on how to treat and handle these artifacts. They aren't just letting people in there willy-nilly. Lorraine herself would often host tours, giving personal accounts of the artifacts' histories. They also offered occasional larger events for paranormal enthusiasts or church groups. And since it was technically not zoned as a commercial museum, which meant it wasn't legally classified as a public attraction, they worked around this by keeping tours private, small, and educational, often as an extension of their lectures through Nesper. After Lorraine's passing in 2019, local zoning issues led to the museum being officially closed to the public. The Monroe Zoning Board stated that the museum's location, a residential neighborhood, was not properly zoned for public gatherings or a commercial enterprise. So all this uproar about it not being an attraction is kind of misinformed. Ed and Lorraine loved sharing this with people. And while they never charged for their investigating services for families in need, they did operate monetarily as a museum because people are curious and the paranormal community does not gatekeep. They help inform. And that's exactly what Matt and Elton are helping to do. This is the changing of the guard. And I know with change, people get upset, but Dan Rivera's legacy wasn't passed on, it was entrusted. I personally feel that Matt and Elton, they're very passionate, very capable, and very respectful of the history here, and that they're the perfect guys for the job. And as always, you can form your own opinion, but before you do, maybe go check out some of those investigations on the Overnight channel first to see for yourself how Elton and the crew and Matt handle investigations. I was actually a little bit nervous to do this episode because there's such a strong emotion surrounding the Warrens and Annabelle and Dan and Matt and Elton and everything. But at the end of the day, I really just wanted to clear up a lot of misconceptions and also tell Annabelle's story because I think it's fascinating. It's one of my favorite stories. And also because I wanted to honor Dan Rivera. So this episode was done in loving memory of him. According to everyone who knew him, he was a wonderful person, very genuine and very kind-hearted. So just wanted to clear all of that up and also tell you a fun, spooky story about one of the most haunted dolls in America and the legacy that will keep her name alive. And that, my spooky friends, is the story of Annabelle, Dan Rivera, and how the Warren legacy is being upheld. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I did the story some justice. And if you have a story that you would like me to share on the podcast, anything spooky, true crime related, you can send it in for next month's Booze Clues episode. Send it to suspectsandspiritspod@gmail.com or the website or DM me through the socials. I've gotten a bunch sent in, so I will need to stagger them out a bit. I definitely do not have time to do an extra episode more than once a month right now. Teaching and momming keep me very busy, but I love this podcast and hope to be doing this for a long time. I enjoy sharing these stories and hearing your perspectives. The true crime gets very grisly, but I have such a fascination with the human mind. And I think those stories are important to tell to make sure that victims have their stories shared in a way that doesn't sensationalize the wrong aspects of the story. If you liked this episode or any other episode, please make sure to share it with your spooky friends, your true crime family, or anyone you may feel would be interested. Go follow the podcast on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook, and be sure to repost. Did you guys see that? Instagram is now allowing you to repost content. So, all you ghouligans listening and members of the True Crime Coven, go repost the videos and help out the podcast. Spread the word. Tell your friends, tell your dog, tell everybody. If you need a new hat, new stickers, or t shirts, be sure to check out the merch on the podcast website as well. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. So thanks for coming to my dead talk. And as always, remember to trust your lizard brain. Until next time, goodbye.